Hello, you're welcome to our lecture on chordates. Earlier, we had discussed about the introductory part of chordates, and I had described chordates as the terrestrial coelomates that at some time in their development have a post-anal tail, a dorsal hollow nerve cord, a notochord, and also endostyle or pharyngeal pouches. And chordates have also been classified into three subphyla. The organisms in the phylum Chordata have also been classified into three subphyla: the subphylum Urochordata, the subphylum Cephalochordata, and the subphylum Vertebrata that we have discussed earlier. We have been able to discuss the subphylum Urochordata. So today we will look at the subphylum Cephalochordata. The subphylum Cephalochordata. Now, what are cephalochordates? Now, the cephalochordates are usually represented by the amphioxus or the lancelets. And these organisms are small fish-like marine invertebrates. They are small fish-like marine invertebrates. They look like fish, but they do not have a vertebral column. They rather have a notochord as their internal or their endoskeleton. Now, these organisms, the amphioxus, are mainly made up of 20 species in two families. And each of the two families have a single genus each. So they are actually not very many. Now, the adult amphioxus or the lancelets reach a length of about 6 to 7 centimeters in length. That's 2.5 inches, very minute organisms. They actually resemble the larval form of the lamprey called the amosate, the larval amosate, the larva of the lamprey in the class Cephalaspidomorpha among the Pisces or the fishes. Now, this is a figure that's showing a lancelet. The lancelets, you see, they are transparent and they still retain their notochord as their endoskeleton. They're actually burrowing organisms. They are actually found embedded in the sand or other bottoms or other sediments in the river or the ocean. Okay. Now, the lancelets are distributed throughout the world along tropical and temperate coasts. They inhabit soft bottoms ranging from sand to quartz, shaly sand, or gravel and shallow coastal waters. The lancelets can swim both forward and backwards and can move rapidly through the gravel in which they live. Let us now look at the general characteristics of organisms in the subphylum Cephalochordata or the Cephalochordates. The Cephalochordates, represented by the lancelets, are called Cephalochordates because the notochord extends from near the tip of the tail to well into the anterior of the body. Okay, cephalo basically means head. Okay, the word cephalochordates is derived from the Greek word kephale, which means head. Okay, so the notochord, for the fact that the notochord extends from the tail to the head. Remember, in the Urochordates, the notochord is limited to the tail alone. Okay, that's why it's called a urochord. And the urochord that it has gives that group the name Urochordates. But in the case of the Cephalochordates, the notochord extends from the tail to the head. The head also has a notochord. That's why it's called That's why the group is called Cephalochordates. The second characteristic of this group is that they do not have the brain case or cranium and are often called acraniates. Remember, we said that the vertebrates are also called craniata, which means cranium. Okay, but these ones, they do not have a brain case, even if they look like fish. Unlike the fish that have a brain case that's covering their brain, these cephalochordates lack a brain case. They are actually not fish. They are non-vertebrate chordates. The third characteristic of this group is that the pharynx, with its many gill slits, is surrounded by atrium. The atrium is a large cavity with a single exit that's called the atriopore on the lower surface of the body. So the pharynx is surrounded by the atrium. The pharynx of the cephalochordates is surrounded by the atrium. The atrium protects the gills of the cephalochordates. The fourth characteristic of the cephalochordates is that the bodies of the cephalochordates, the lancelets, like those of fishes and other vertebrates, are largely made up of serially repeated units or segments that include blocks of muscles called metameres. Okay, they have segmented bodies. They possess a well-developed, distinct secondary body cavity. That's the fifth characteristic of this group. The fifth characteristic of this group is that the cephalochordates or the lancelets, they possess a well-developed, distinct secondary body cavity. Their coelom is well-developed. The sixth characteristic of this group is that they are burrowers and also filter feeders. The cephalochordates are burrowers and also filter feeders. They burrow into the sand and leave only their heads exposed so as to carry out filter feeding. Just as you can see in this picture, they burrow into the sand and then they bring out only their head to filter feed from the water that's surrounding them to filter out food particles, including some microorganisms, some small organisms like phytoplanktons, zooplanktons to feed. We want to look at the anatomy and physiology of the cephalopods. Anatomy and physiology of the cephalopods. The external anatomy and physiology of the cephalopods. The lancelets or the cephalopods are streamlined animals. Just as you can see here, their bodies are slender. They have tapering anterior and posterior ends. And that gives them a fish-like look. You know, they have pointed anterior and posterior end, and their body is streamlined, which enables them to swim swiftly in the water. A dorsal fin extends along the upper surface of the body and continues as a caudal fin around a tail and as a ventral fin to an atrium on the lower surface. Okay, so they lack paired fins also. The lancelets lack paired fins, but they possess metapleural folds along the sides of the body that look like rudimentary paired fins. One other external feature of these organisms is that the tip of the body projects slightly above and in front of the mouth. The tip of the body projects slightly above and in front of the mouth, which is surrounded by funnel-like oral hood that bears a syringe. The anus of the lancelets or the amphioxus opens well behind the atriopore on the left side of the ventral fin. The anus opens at the left side of the ventral fin. The general body surface is covered by smooth cuticle layer of the general body surface of the amphioxus. The body of the amphioxus consists mostly of a trunk. The body of the amphioxus consists mostly of a trunk. It's not actually divided into head, trunk, and tail. It just consists mostly of a trunk. The length of the trunk has repeated units of muscles termed the moyers that serve for locomotion. The repeated muscles known as moyers serve for locomotion, enables the fish to move rapidly, okay, enables it to move. The moyers are composed of uninucleated, straighted muscle fibers, okay? The muscle fibers have just one nucleus, and they are found in the metameres, okay? Adjacent metameres are separated by a thin partition called the myoseptum or the myocoma. Now look at the figure that's showing the external anatomy of the amphioxus or the lancelets. Just as we've said, they have a streamlined body shape, okay, and they have repeated muscles that are called the myotomes, the repeated muscles, okay, segments that are called the body segments, they are called myotomes, okay, and they have dorsal fins, okay, which extends to the tail to form the anal fin. This is the dorsal fin, okay, the dorsal fin extends to form the anal fin and also forms the ventral fin and terminates around the atriopore. Then they also have oral tentacles, which are around the oral hood. Then around the oral hood, you have the gills that are basically important for feeding and respiration. Now I want to look at the internal anatomy and physiology of the Cephalochordate. First, reproduction and life cycle. The lancelets or amphioxus or the organisms in the phylum Cephalochordata possess separate sexes. So unlike the tunicates, unlike those in the phylum Urochordata, the Cephalochordates, the Urochordates, like we said earlier, they are hermaphrodites. They have both male and female sexes in one. They are said to be monoecious. But these lancelets or the organisms in the subphylum Cephalochordata have separate sexes. They are dioecious, which means that they develop only ovaries or testes. They have separate sexes. So they have males and females. And they also reproduce asexually. Asexual reproduction doesn't occur in this group. Unlike the Urochordates that reproduce asexually through budding, the Cephalochordates do not undergo asexual reproduction. In mature amphioxus, the gonads will be prominent and will burst into the atrium. So the gonads, they bulge to form what we call the atrium. The gonads release sperm or egg into the atrium. The gametes are released from the atrium by the atriopore. Now look at the figure showing the internal anatomy of the lancelet, and which is also showing the gonads. These are the gonads, the reproductive organs, okay, that produce either sperm or the ovary, the eggs, either sperm or the eggs. Now, they carry out external fertilization. The lancelets carry out external fertilization. Eggs and sperms are shed directly into the water where fertilization occurs. The early stages of development strictly resemble those of both tunicates and vertebrates. A larva is produced that is similar in structure to the adult, but is peculiarly asymmetrical. That it actually doesn't have a bilateral symmetry like other chordates. And it's smaller and simpler with fewer gill slits and no atrium. Okay, so the larval form that's produced is similar to the adult, but it does not have a definite symmetry. It's said to be asymmetrical. The larvae spend much of their time feeding in the open water, but can be found on the bottom. So the larvae are usually pelagic, but they can also be found in the benthic zone. After growing and developing, they metamorphose into the adult form and complete their life history in substrates. Okay, just like it is here, when they become adults, they become burrowers. They burrow into substrates and only bring out their heads to feed. The coelom is reduced in adult Amphioxus. It becomes laterally compressed as the larva elongates and more pharyngeal bars are added. As a result, only a trace of the coelom is found in the adult Amphioxus. The rest of the part of the Amphioxus is usually made up of muscles, or repeated segments of muscles. The skeleton, tissues, and muscles of cephalopods. That's the next subheading. The notochord of the cephalopods extends virtually the entire length of the body, and it serves as the endoskeleton. It provides much of the support of the lancelets or the cephalopods. It has a firm sheath and a core made up of single series of cells that contains muscle fibers. These fibers probably maintain the stiffness of the notochord. Apart from the notochord, the gills, the fins, and the series also serve as skeleton. They contain stiff supportive rods that help to support the internal skeleton of the lancelets or the Amphioxus. Nervous system. The nervous system of the Amphioxus is similar to that of vertebrates. It has a central nervous system consisting of a brain and a spinal cord. The Amphioxus, or those organisms in the subphylum Cephalochordata, possess a central nervous system that has both brain and the spinal cord. The main nerve cord, which is single and hollow, is in all chordates and has a slight swelling at the front that barely qualifies as a brain. Okay, so the brain is actually not well developed. It is usually called the ganglion. Okay, this is a figure that's showing the internal anatomy of the Amphioxus, showing the brain and the nerve cord. Now, this is the brain at the tip of the Amphioxus. Then this is the nerve cord of the Amphioxus, the nerve cord of the Amphioxus. The digestive system of the Amphioxus. Lancelets or Amphioxus, or the organisms in the subphylum Cephalochordata, are filter feeders that extract small particles suspended in water. They are filter feeders. They extract, as they bring out their head from their substrate, just as it is shown here, they filter food particles that are suspended in the water. The mouth is covered by an oral hood, the edges of which form the buccal cilium. The cephalochordate commonly is buried in substrate and positions its mouth above the surface of the sand. During feeding, the cilia form a kind of grid that keeps out large particles. Water is drawn into the mouth by the beating action of cilia on the gills. Okay, the cilia on the gills help to create a water current that brings in food which are being trapped. Amphioxus possess pharyngeal slits. The pharynx is a large section of the gut just behind the mouth, extending about 2/3 of the length of the body, with many narrow gill slits. Okay, so basically the organisms filter feed. They filter the food particles from the water. Okay, the slits do not serve a respiratory role, but instead help to facilitate filter feeding. The water current enters the pharynx, passes through the gill basket to the atrium, and leaves the body through the atriopore. Okay, when the food enters into the system, the food particles are absorbed, and then undigested food particles are sent out through the anus. Okay, they do not actually have a distinct stomach. The intestine is usually straight, except for a blinding out pouching called the caecum, which has the basis of position being compared to the liver and pancreas of vertebrates. It extends forward along the right side of the pharynx. Now, this is the digestive system. Food goes in through the mouth that's surrounded by the oral hood that has tentacles, and then it's being filtered by the pharynx. Food particles get into the intestine. The amphioxus does not have a stomach. So in the intestines, absorption of food takes place, and undigested food substances are expelled through the anus. Excretory system. Cephalochordates lack an organized kidney. Instead, individual cellular components known as cytopodocytes, or they are also called solenocytes. These cytopodocytes filter blood, which occur only in some distinctly related animals, such as annelids. So the cytopodocytes are rudimentary between the protonephridia of invertebrates and the podocytes of vertebrates. They are rudimentary kidneys or excretory organs that are not well developed as the kidney. The cephalochordates lack an organized kidney for excretion of waste. Respiration. One unique feature of the cephalochordates is that the gills are largely for feeding. They usually use the gills for feeding, but they also help in the exchange of gases. So the gills, apart from being used for feeding, they are also used for respiration. Okay, so after the water has passed through the gill slit, it reaches the atrium and exits through the atriopore. Excretory products and eggs and sperm also exit the body through this opening. So basically, the gills of the cephalochordates are used for both feeding and for respiration. Amphioxus also use the skin for respiration. It has semi-transparent skin composed of 2 layers, okay, which are used for respiration. So they carry out cutaneous respiration. The amphioxus also carry out cutaneous respiration. Now I want to look at the circulatory system of the amphioxus, or organisms in the subphylum Cephalochordata. Amphioxus, or the cephalochordates, their circulation differs significantly from that of vertebrates. They lack heart. The cephalochordates, they lack hearts. And the blood of the cephalochordates is a colorless serum. Unlike the blood of other chordates, like the vertebrates, that's reddish in color because of hemoglobin, the blood of the cephalochordates is colorless. They also, one similarity to vertebrate circulation is that the amphioxus venous pathways resemble those of embryonic vertebrates. Their venous pathways resemble that of the embryos of vertebrates. The key point we want to take here is that the amphioxus lack a heart. They don't have heart that pumps blood. and their blood is colorless. The blood actually is forced through the closed system by contractile blood vessels. And those contractile blood vessels are called the ventral aorta, and by blood vessels of the gills. So basically, the pumping of the blood is facilitated by these contractile blood vessels that are called the ventral aorta and the gills. Okay, the blood vessels of the gills. The blood passes forward from the rear of the body to the ventral aorta, which is located beneath the endostyle, and then branches upward through the vessels in the gills. So one key point we want to take from the circulatory system of the lancelets is that their blood do not have corpuscles. They do not have blood cells such as red blood cells, white blood cells, the platelets. So we have looked at key features of the circulatory system. One key feature is that they lack hearts. They also have a colorless blood, and that their blood does not have blood cells. Okay, the blood of the amphibians lack blood cells. Thanks for listening. Our next lecture will now expand on what we have discussed so far. We have discussed successfully about the Protochordates. Earlier, we talked about the Urochordates, and then now we have discussed about the Cephalochordates. Watch out for more videos on the subphylum Vertebrata and the phylum Chordata. Thanks.